Iran was saying they were going to release their demands to end the war. Who knows if there are actually talks going on with the Trump administration right now? I mean, Trump's obviously said we've had good and productive talks, and I think we know that over the weekend that was probably bullshit. Iran has said that they're not going to. There have been rumors that there maybe have been some kind of like back channel communications. But this is per a report from Wall Street Journal. This was the Iran response to the Trump administration's proposal for a ceasefire. And here are the demands, which actually seem quite reasonable. A new order for the Strait of Hormuz that would allow Iran to collect fees from ships that transit the waterway, as Egypt does now with the Suez Canal. Guarantees that the war wouldn't restart, and an end to Israel's strikes on the Iran-aligned Lebanese militia Hezbollah, lifting all sanctions on Iran, permitting Iran to keep its missile program with no negotiations to limit it. And it's amazing how, like, if through some miracle America did actually agree to this because they just want to get out of this situation that they've found themselves in, how much worse of a situation that would be than what they had prior to launching this like completely idiotic war. Part of the deal, baby. Iran rejects U.S. ceasefire plan, issues its own demands as strikes land across the Mideast. Iran on Wednesday dismissed an American plan to pause the war in the Middle East. And as we've talked about endlessly, anything like a pause in the war, all that means, unless they get actual meaningful guarantees, all a pause means is they're going to take all that time to build more interceptors and rearm and entrench themselves even further. And Iran knows this full well. And probably knows full well that any actual negotiations are quite possibly just pretense to assassinate their leadership, which is what the last negotiations were. Iran on Wednesday dismissed an American plan to pause the war in the Middle East and launch, by definitionally, a pause doesn't mean a ceasefire. It means it's stopping briefly. And launched more attacks on Israel and Gulf Arab countries, including an assault that sparked a huge fire at Kuwait International Airport. Iran's defiance came as Israel launched airstrikes on Tehran and as the United States deployed paratroopers and more Marines to the region. And as we've talked about, that to me is the ultimate sign that they are going to go forward with some kind of a ground invasion, which is going to be a disaster, which Iran have openly said that they're waiting for and hoping for. But they're deploying all these troops to the region, and I don't think they would be deploying them to the region. It's not just a show of strength. They're deploying them because they intend to deploy them, actually. Iranian state television's press language broadcaster quoted an anonymous official as saying Iran rejected America's ceasefire proposal and has its own demands for an end to the fighting. Iran will end the war when it decides to do so and when its own conditions are met. The hardliner-controlled Press TV, quoted the official as saying. Earlier, two officials from Pakistan, which transmitted the U.S. plan to Iran, described the 15-point proposal broadly, saying it addressed sanctions relief, a rollback of Iran's nuclear program, limits on missiles, and reopening the Strait of Hormuz, through which a fifth of the world's oil is shipped. An Egyptian official involved in the mediation efforts said the proposal also includes restrictions on Iran's support for arms groups. The officials spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss details not yet released. And again, why would they agree to any of this? Why would they agree to any of this whatsoever? White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt said, U.S. and Iran are in ongoing talks. Even as Iranian officials deny it, talks continue. They're productive, as the president said on Monday, and they continue to be. She said, Leavitt warned that if talks with Iran don't pan out, President Trump will ensure they're hit harder than they've ever been hit before. And again, as I keep saying, you can't keep saying over and over, we're going to hit you harder than ever before. That's what the last couple of weeks was supposed to be. That's what Trump said the last couple of weeks were supposed to be. Eventually, when you keep saying, we're going to hit you harder than ever before to a country that you're hitting over and over and over and over, eventually they're going to start believing that you're completely talking out of your ass. Empty offers, empty threats. Some of the points in the U.S. ceasefire proposal were non-starters in negotiations before the war. Iran has insisted it won't discuss its ballistic missile program or its support for regional militias, which it views as keys to its security. And I don't think anyone could deny that they are keys to its security. And its ability to control passage through the Strait of Hormuz represents one of its biggest strategic advantages. Iran's attacks on regional energy infrastructure, along with its restrictions on the strait, have sent oil prices skyrocketing, putting pressure on the U.S. to find a way to end the chokehold and calm markets. More U.S. troops on the way to the Middle East. And I hope these troops are doing extensive research on fragging right now, because they're going to need this info. They're giving them lobster. They're giving them lobster and steak dinners to these poor motherfuckers who are going to be thrown into the meat grinder for the Epstein class. Can't say I feel too bad for them, but like there's still time to turn the ship around. or clog all the toilets on the ship, as it were. At least 1,000 troops from the 82nd Airborne Division will be sent to the Mideast in the coming days. Paratroopers are trained to jump into hostile or contested areas to secure key territory and airfields. The Pentagon is also in the process of sending about 5,000 more Marines. And I would do yourself a favor and look up the initial Marines being sent to the Vietnam theater as well, and you'll notice that it's remarkably similar. Trained in amphibious assaults and thousands of sailors to the region. Most Americans believe the U.S. military action against Iran has gone too far, and many are worried about affording gasoline. This survey indicates that while Trump's approval rating is holding steady, the conflict could be swiftly turning into a major political liability. What's going to happen on social media when we get the first POV clip of one of these drones turning one of these American Special Forces guys to hamburger? How's that going to go when that gets released on social media? It's going to get close enough to see his Totenkopf tattoos. What are people going to respond to that? Mediators are pushing for possible in-person talks between the Iranians and the Americans, perhaps as soon as Friday in Pakistan, Egyptian and Pakistani officials said. This is funny. Trump has said the U.S. is in negotiations right now and that the participants include Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, his son-in-law Jared Kushner. Why the fuck? Even if they're being honest about this, why are Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner negotiating to end this conflict? Along with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Vice President J.D. Vance. He has not disclosed who from Iran they're in contact with, but said the other side, I can tell you they'd like to make a deal. This man is just fully lying through his teeth. Press TV cited an Iranian 5-point plan for a ceasefire coming from the official who rejected the U.S. proposal. That plan includes a halt to killings of its officials. How unreasonable. Means to make sure no other war is waged against it, reparations for the war, and the end of hostilities and Iran's exercise over sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. Those measures, particularly reparations and its continued chokehold over the Strait of Hormuz, likely will be unacceptable to the White House. Yeah, and this is what I was referring to. Watch the moment an Iranian drone attracts a Black Hawk helicopter at a military base in Iraq. Like we're not far away from seeing footage of one of these like special forces psychos looking up like a deer in headlights at one of these drones approaching. It's an interesting thing. I've seen a lot of speculating about this as well. This whole idea about the myth of the U.S. Spec Ops, Special Forces Commando, how that's going to be punctured if they do send these guys in and they get decimated, which is most likely what's going to happen. And here's a question to ask yourself, too, when you watch this footage of the drone hitting the helicopter is how much did the drone cost versus how much did the helicopter cost? Again, going back to that video we watched earlier. What's the cost of this drone versus the cost of the helicopter that it just turned into a fireball? The radar they blew up is $70 million. It's not long before we're going to see one of these special forces dudes in one of these videos. And how's the world going to react to that? And then it gets also into the question of, like, yes, you see, this is how the U.S. is losing the war. But yeah, our troops have nothing to fight for, where their troops have everything to fight for. This is the ultimate question about, like, colonizing armies and the people they're attempting to occupy. This is why they'll never win in this situation of this kind of asymmetrical warfare. It's why they'll always lose, no matter, even if it takes years. It's why they lost in Afghanistan. It's why they lost in Vietnam. You know, what other examples do you want to name? It's like inevitable. It's like as inevitable as the laws of physics. It's part of the problem of how people talk about the Venezuela operation. The USA had to plan for months to make mock-ups of the Venezuela Capitol building, killed 100+ people, and they only just luckily made it. One of the helicopter guys got shot up pretty badly and almost didn't make it. But it's all talked about as such an easy operation. Yeah, and as we've gotten into before, like it's what gave them this invincible feeling. Why not go into Iran? Look how easy that was. Well, it turns out that it's not so easy. It is part of the myth making, yes. And like I said, there's already a myth about these special forces guys to begin with. I talked to Seth Harp, obviously, last summer about his book. Yeah, and I mean, look, when we're talking about puncturing the myth of the American Special Forces operator, that's what his whole career is now, is puncturing that myth. This myth of the superhuman Special Forces American operator, and exposing them as being the violent, bloodthirsty, murderous drug addicts that they are. Ironically, Donald Trump is doing more to decolonize the Middle East than any other president. That's why we call him J.D. Pondon. Trust the process. Just the more time goes on, I think I was trying to take a more optimistic view of this just a couple days ago, but the more time that goes on, it does feel like an inevitability now. Again, they're not massing all these troops there and bringing them there for no reason. They're bringing them there so they can invade. Sometimes it's like the easiest possible explanation, no matter how insane we might think it is. prospects of it are scary because it just feels like, it's a way that things can escalate and escalate. And yes, that can also enhance the decline and the eventual dissolution of the entire US empire. But the global far reaching consequences of that are scary to me if it does happen. But if they do it, it's going to be a historic disaster. And there's going to be no getting around that. If it doesn't, we're going to just have to talk about the reality of what's happening because it's obviously out of our control. We can go out right now and protest. We can organize an anti-war protest. I've seen a lot of this, like, where are these anti-war protests? And like, first of all, there are protests happening. But I think people have realized, like, what would that accomplish? It might signal to the world or signal to people that there's some opposition to the war, but we all know full well that we have no say in anything that's happening. We have no say whatsoever as to whether this war continues or whether it ends. So that's completely beyond our controls. I talked a few days ago about this idea of going back to like Vietnam and asymmetrical warfare and these like traps that you'd step in, and the more you struggle, and the more you struggle, the more you get stuck in the trap. That's America right now. That's Trump right now. And if they do fully commit to this, which it looks like they're doing, that's the next level of that. Just the more they commit to this, the more they try to escalate, the more completely screwed they're going to be. Look at Palestine and Gaza. People did protest. People put their lives on the line, their safety on the line. People got kicked out of schools. People lost jobs and career opportunities. Like, people have been putting hope on the ground is just how awake to what's going on the Marines are. And it's not an insignificant number of them, but that may not matter because as aware of dying for pedophiles as they are, Marines follow orders. Well, except when they start losing. And again, that's why I always like to go back to Vietnam and this whole idea of fragging, because by 1973 or so, the American military was in full-scale revolt. But it also took tens of thousands of Americans going home in body bags to get to that point. Maybe they can just skip to the end. Maybe they can skip to the end where they start fragging and rather than going home in the body bag in the first place. But we'll see how it goes. Again, I don't have a ton of confidence in a lot of these people and their revolutionary potential. I think where the protest shit would actually land if we hadn't all lived through the largest protest mobilization 6 years ago and nothing changed. In fact, everything got worse. And all the demands that the protesters were having got turned into like attack ads and scolding people for ruining liberal election chances. This is from IRIB, Iranian State TV. And he says, if there's going to be a ground invasion, that the Iranian forces will go and seize the coasts of Bahrain and the Emirates, which is crazy to think about. Yeah, as we've seen with Bahrain, it's majority Shia, ruled by a corrupt family. Just look at the footage of the Iranian missiles hitting the U.S. military infrastructure there. You have people celebrating and cheering in the streets. They already tried to storm the embassy once. It's just crazy to think of how fast this can escalate if they really go through with this, and all signs are pointing to them wanting to go through with it.
But this has been imposed upon us by the Trump regime, by the Israeli regime, first and foremost, and by their regional proxies. They can't pretend that they are neutral. That's an insult to our intelligence. They are part of this war.
I've seen people use the analogy too. The idea that China is launching missiles at America based on Chinese military bases in Canada. And the idea in that case that Canada could say, we're not involved. Don't attack Canada. What did we do? We're not doing anything. All we're doing is being home to the military bases that are being used to launch the attack, and that's all. Other than that, we have nothing to do with it. Obviously, that's ridiculous. Obviously, no one would ever buy that. And while I do support Canada being home to Chinese military bases, that's not currently happening. And if that did happen, America or anyone else around the world would obviously understand that Canada was culpable for some of the attacks that were happening. And there wouldn't be this display of profound lack of understanding. Oh, America's just attacking Canada for no reason now. Everyone would understand why that was happening. I would love that for us too, but it's not currently happening, nor will it be happening anytime soon, in my understanding. But if it did happen, we would not be able to use that excuse that we weren't involved, because you're clearly involved. If you allow your house to be used for your buddy to commit a murder, and you know full well that he's doing it, and then the police are like, what's going on with your house? Someone did a murder in there. And you're just like, listen, I have nothing to do with this whatsoever. All I did was allow him to do the murder in my home. I was not there. I was not involved, but you were involved. You were involved, though. It's your house. We only pretend not to understand this stuff when it involves America's enemies. It's crazy how, like, you know, delusional this is. It's crazy how delusional this statement is.
President Trump does not bluff, and he is prepared to unleash hell. Iran should not miscalculate again. Their last miscalculation cost them their senior leadership, their Navy, their Air Force, and their air defense system. Any violence beyond this point will be because the Iranian regime refused to understand they have already been defeated and refused to come to a deal.
You keep saying this word, defeated. I do not think it means what you think it means. They've already been defeated. That's why the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. That's why Israel is still being hit. That's why our military infrastructure is getting blown up by $30,000 drones. They just don't understand yet. They don't understand that they've already been defeated. They're not acting like a country that's been defeated at all. They refuse to agree to be defeated. We're reaching out to them to talk about terms for their defeat, and they're telling us to go away. They're telling us to go F ourselves. It's like they don't even understand that they've been defeated already. These people they're so delusional. Does their own base even buy this? Like, I get that there's certain people in MAGA or whoever that are going to continue to believe everything that they say, but like, does this work on anybody?
The president yesterday said that he had achieved regime change in Iran because the regime has changed. In terms of...
has it not?
Well, the leadership...
Their entire leadership has been killed, and nobody has really seen or legitimately heard from this alleged new leader. So wouldn't you say there's been a change in the regime?
There's been a change in leadership. I mean,
there's been a regime leadership, which is what the president said. So thank you for confirming he was right.
I mean, do you feel as though...
Lady, come on. It's so pathetic. It really is. It's so bad. The United States is negotiating with itself, an Iranian military spokesman said, according to state media on Wednesday, a day after the U.S. President Donald Trump said Tehran wants to make a deal to end the war in the Middle East. A 15-point plan aimed at putting an end to the conflict was drafted by Washington and sent to Tehran. A person familiar with the matter told Reuters on Tuesday, "Yeah, it's going great. Everything's going according to plan. They are dabbing on us, and you deserve to be dabbed on."
Questions in my reporting speak a lot to young voters, many of whom voted for President Trump for the first time in 2024, hoping to have no more wars and to have lower prices. Now, with the war taking place and with gas prices going up, curious what President Trump's message would be to those voters who kind of swung into his coalition in 2024, but maybe don't feel the administration's going as they had expected.
President Trump is doing this for you. He's doing this for young people so that we are no longer threatened by a rogue terrorist regime in the Middle East that seeks to kill the brave men and women who serve in our country in the Middle East, many of them young people themselves, young men and women who serve this country honorably in uniform and have been threatened, killed, and maimed by the rogue Iranian terrorist regime for 47 years. President Trump finally had the courage to step up and do what's right by our national security, our homeland security. As for the temporary short-term fluctuation in gas prices, the president has said once these combat operations are over, this administration is going to continue to unleash American energy dominance. We're continuing to do that every day, and we're going to see prices at the pump go back down, just as we have over the past year because of this president. And don't think for 1 second if that the Democrats had their way, gas prices would be as they were under the previous administration, the Biden administration, record highs. This president is keeping them as low as he can.
They were literally lower under the previous administration, lady.
Go right back down when this is over.
Thank you.
Yeah, does anyone believe, these young people that voted for Trump, who specifically said president of peace, no more foreign Middle Eastern wars? All of a sudden there is the imminent threat of Iran. No one believes this anymore. You voted for us to not do what we're doing, but we're doing it because you voted for us.